Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. So yesterday we did a video on a fuel pump replacement on a 2010 GMC Acadia. Tonight we're gonna do a video on how to replace the spark plugs in them because they are pretty fuel fouled and pretty corroded with some carbon buildup, which I'll show you here in a minute. So first things first, I'll show you what you're gonna need as tools go. Of course, you're gonna need your new spark plugs there. This one requires 6. I highly recommend you using AC Delco plugs, exact OE replacements that came in the vehicle. Nothing's going to perform better. Auto lights, Bosch, anything like that's not going to perform well at all. So take out the spark plug if you can, find the number that's on it, match it exactly, and get those. Okay, so pretty much what you're going to need is a ratchet, 10 millimeter, either a swivel or a deep well, whichever one you have, extension. You're going to need a spark plug socket. The reason I have 2 here is this is a magnetic spark plug socket. If you've never used one, I'm telling you right now, it is the best thing since sliced bread. You don't have to worry about wiggling the spark plug socket off of the spark plug, especially in hard to reach places. So it is fantastic, and I'll show you why here in a little bit. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, this is a 5/8 spark plug socket, by the way. There is 2 different sizes. This is going to cover most of your cars. Anything bigger is going to probably be in a bigger industrial size truck or big machinery, something like that. So 5/8. Okay, so first thing you're going to want to do is on this particular vehicle, let me grab my flashlight. This has a setup to where you can get to the rears, but you can't get to the fronts. Because if you try and take this coil out of the front, it'll hit the intake. So the intake's going to have to be removed. Okay, so I'll show you the steps in doing that here in just a second. All right, so first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you the ins and outs of these rear ones. Not too difficult to do these. It's kind of difficult to get a good view of them though, so I'll try my best. But right back here, there's a coil here, 1 here, and 1 over there. There's 3 in the back. There's a connector right there if you can't see it. So really on these, you're just going to need to reach back, disconnect the connector. There's a little clip on top. Push it, pull the connector out. Push the connector to the side. On these particular vehicles, there is a power steering line right here. So on this one, if you pull it straight up, it's going to hit that line. Okay, so a little trick, just twist it to the side. Move the connector part out, and you're going to slide it right up and out. Okay, this is an ignition coil. Okay, when replacing spark plugs on a vehicle like this, it's never a bad idea to replace the 3 that are hardest to get to, because these are very common for going out. Okay, so on this particular engine with this intake that this one has, if you have the money, go ahead and replace those front coils that are up here. Okay, because if they're to go bad, you're either taking this intake back off or you're paying somebody to do it again. Okay, so the cool thing you'll notice about my videos is I've done this for a long time. So if there's any tips or tricks that I can show you or tell you about, or a common problem that you might run into, I'm gonna let you know as I'm doing the job. Okay, the hardest thing about doing your own repairs at home is if you encounter a problem, how do you fix it? Same thing I encounter in my house doing electrical or something like that. If the problem arises, I don't know how to fix it. So if there's something I can let you guys know, I will. Okay, so the back one's pretty straightforward. They have 3 bolts, one 10 millimeter bolt per coil. Looks like this. It's going to be right there on the side. You'll have to feel for it. This is where a 10 millimeter swivel socket comes in handy, but you will be able to do it without a swivel socket. You can just use a deep well 10 or a shallow with an extension. So those are the easiest ones to do. So I'm gonna get those done real quick, and then we'll tackle the fronts, and I'll show you how to get the intake off. All right, so I'm just gonna show you these. These are 3 of the new spark plugs that are gonna be going in the front. The ones in the back are done, but I wanna show you the difference. These are new ones, these are old ones. These are 3 that came out of the back. I'm gonna show you one in particular. There's this one right here. If you can see it, has some carbon buildup that has closed the gap on the spark plug quite a bit. Not a lot of room for spark to go through. So I pulled these out, pretty black. Don't know the last time they've been changed, but again, find the part number on the side. It's gonna have 2 part numbers, an AC Delco number, and then more like an aftermarket number. So a couple things. You're gonna want to get the same spark plug. But you're also, two things. You're going to want to gap these spark plugs. If they're platinum spark plugs, do not gap them. They come pre-gapped. You could damage the spark plug when you go to gap them. Okay, look at them. Maybe compare them to the old ones to make sure. Always, so three things. Number two, always check them before you put them in. We have seen these been dropped before on their ends, and it bends this little strap right here, right? This strap right here, it bends it, okay? And you don't want to use it. Send it back. Take it back. And the third thing is always torque your spark plugs down. If you don't have a lot of experience doing spark plugs, please torque them down. That way they don't back themselves out and you have an issue down the road, okay? So please torque them. You can get torque specs online, make sure it's from a reliable source, but please go ahead and torque them down. Okay, so now to do the front ones. These are a bit more complicated than doing the rears, okay? This intake here, right here, is in the way, okay? If you go to pull these up, it hits right here, and you can't get these out, okay? Hits right here. So first I'm gonna start off by taking the intake boot off, taking these wire looms off the intake here, these hoses off, this connector's here, and then we'll go ahead and unbolt the intake, and I have a trick to show you on those bolts as well. I'll be right back. All right, so I got the intake boot off here. Solenoid here, purge solenoid. One thing about this line here is it has a clip that's supposed to be in here. You push both sides together and you pull it out. Now, what you want to do first is you want to push it all the way in, squeeze those clips together, pull it out. Now, this has been out before. I know this because this side was broken. As soon as I pushed it, you could hear it crack and break, and now the clip's gone. So if that happens, you can see if you can find a clip for it. If not, you're gonna have to replace this line. Now it is a purge solenoid, it's fuel vapors. So if you can't find the clip, you might get a code because it might not seal properly, it might not stay in here. It might pop out, okay? So got that off. This line here, do not take it off here. You're gonna break this end and you won't be able to put it back on, okay? This other end here has a clip here. If I can get you a good picture on it, you're just gonna slide it over and pull it off. It goes right back here to the back of the valve cover on the back side, okay? Take it off back there, swing it all the way around, bring it up front, okay? I'm gonna take this bolt off here, separate that harness. Be careful with these. The older they get, the more they crack and break. If you just yank on it, it's gonna break off, okay? Not a huge deal, but if you wanna leave it the way you found it, put a screwdriver in there, pry it off, okay? Now, one thing I do wanted to show you is this connector back here. This is for your throttle body. Okay, these connectors can be tricky. What you'll want to do is just stick a screwdriver right in there and just work it out slowly, okay? Working on cars is not a fast job, okay? You want to be careful. These clips, they get old, they crack, they break, and then just push that clip down right there, pull it right out, okay? So now this one, it takes about ready to come out. There's not much more to it than that, honestly. So you just want to get everything out of the way or loose so you can move it. So I'm gonna go ahead and unbolt it, and I'm gonna show you a trick on what to do with these bolts to get that far. So I'll be right back. All right, so we are back. Now this intake here particularly has 6 bolts. You have one down in here that I already took out. Put a light down there, right there. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? Not very difficult to remove. Now, one thing you wanna keep in mind is if you have an earlier model, Acadia, Traverse, Enclave, it might have a different intake on it. It's going to be what I call the bubble intake, right? It's just going to go straight up and down, not going to have a lot of room up here, okay? Now, one trick that I learned very quickly is if you have that intake, you're going to have to put the bolts in it before you put the intake back in, because if you don't, there won't be room here for you to put the bolt in. So one thing that I learned, I kind of figured out, was take a rubber band and loop it around these, and it holds them up like this, okay? So if you have that intake, put rubber bands around it. It'll hold them up so you can put the intake back in with the bolts fitted in there. I'm telling you, if you don't do this, the bolts will sink all the way down in the holes, and you won't be able to get the intake all the way on because they'll be hitting stuff down there. So do yourself a favor, just grab some rubber bands if you have the bubble intake, is what I call it. Just a big hump right here. Now I call this a pancake intake. It's very flat. You got a lot of room to get back in there. They changed the design a little bit. Not a big deal which one you have, but it is what it is. Little things change here and there as the years go on. Okay, so now with this car's got about 200,000 miles on it. So it's been on there for a while. so it wouldn't come off just by hand. So I just took a little bit of pry bar here right underneath the throttle body and the valve cover and just kind of popped it like that. Okay, so now you can see it's loose. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift this up just a hair, and I'm going to pull those right out. I'm not even going to take it all the way off. Another trick, you don't have to remove this thing all the way out of there. So I'll tell you right now, it's not the funnest thing to wiggle out and wiggle back in. So if you don't have to, don't. Just leave it in there, lift it up a little bit. Now when you go back in, I'll show you this in a minute. Make sure it seats all the way down. Okay, again, that's why I'm going to rubber band the bolts up. That way I can get it to go flat, and then I'll release the bolts back down in there. So I'm going to pull these out, and then I'll be right back with you. All right, I got the front ones all pulled out. They all look about the same like this. This is just a picture of the old one on the left, new one on the right. Pretty covered. I mean, it is what it is, 200,000 miles, you know. So one other tip that I will let you know, please don't ever start these spark plugs with anything other than your hand. Put it in the socket and lower it down in the spark plug well. Make sure it goes in smooth, and you turn it, you know, 5, 6, 7, 10 times before you start using anything else to put it in with. If you cross thread this spark plug into that cylinder head, you're going to pull the cylinder head off and send it out to be fixed. Okay, it's not going to be an easy task. It's much easier to just put it down in the hole with the spark plug socket on an extension and start it by hand, and then you can put it in. You know, I trust handy dandy ratcheting wrench power. If you do a lot of work on your own, get one of these. $60 on Amazon. That's the one I have now. Works fantastic. You know, I use that until it stops, and I don't force it anymore. I use it and then I torque it. Okay, so please don't ever put these in with anything other than starting it by hand. Okay, now I'm gonna get these put in, the coils back on, bolted down, and then we'll put the intake back on, and we'll get this done. All right, so spark plugs are back in, coils are back in. I did end up taking off this purge solenoid just so I could get to that hole a little bit better, and not have to take the intake completely off. So it's literally one 10mm bolt, and then you just wiggle it out nice and slow. Make sure you don't tear the seal on that. Okay, so now when you're going back in, the reason I put the bolts up like this with rubber bands is just to keep them there. I don't need to take them all the way out. I just took the one little one that goes down in there out. Now, the thing about this intake is once it goes back in, you're going to notice. It's going to just feel like it's back in there. One thing you want to do is check to make sure your gasket, which is right in there, right next to that connector, is still seated to where it was. Now, I'm going to reuse mine. I've done this so many times that it's a mostly plastic gasket, and it's pretty durable and reusable. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse it. Now, this is my own vehicle as well. If you're doing this for somebody else, I'd highly recommend to take the intake off and replace the gasket. That is just the proper way to do it. So another thing you want to do is make sure all your connectors are out of the way and don't get sandwiched in there. See how that just kind of fell right back in? Now that's just in there and it's good to go. So I'm going to take my rubber bands off and get the bolts down in there. Let them fall in. Okay, same thing with these. Start them by hand. Make sure they go in. Pull on them a little bit, make sure they're in. Take this little one here, move it down in here. Start it by hand as well. Now again, just make sure all your connectors are out of the way. Nothing's squishing, nothing's there. Looks good. Now, with this particular vehicle, there is a sequence to your torque, the way you torque this down. Okay, I just drew it out rough. I did just Google it. It's 18 foot-pounds first pass, and then do a second pass of 18 foot-pounds. I'm assuming, well, I know it's because they want you to torque it down evenly and do a second pass to make sure it's torqued down perfectly flat. Okay, so you're going to want to start here, go here. It's pretty much diagonal. 3, 4, 5, and then 6. That's to 18 foot-pounds, both passes. Make sure you do this sequence exactly. That way it goes on even and you don't have any problems. So a couple things I didn't mention was you need 13 millimeter socket, excuse me, for the bolts on the intake. And then, of course, I have a nice digital torque wrench here to use. But you can use a mechanical one too, the one that you spin in, and just make sure you set it. Mine's set at 18 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque this down and then start putting, pretty much reverse the way you came. You'll just start putting everything back together the way you found it. So I'm gonna get this torqued down and then I'll be right back with you. So I just did my first pass. I'm just gonna go ahead and show you my second pass now that it's already torqued. Beeped 18, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then number 6 is down there. I'll do that. I got an extension, so sorry for the back and forth, but I only have, it's hard to work when you're holding the phone. So I'll torque that last one down, and then I'm gonna get it back together, and then we'll see what happens when it's back together. All right, so I got the boot back on. All these hoses are back on. Straps are back on. Connector, purge solenoid is back on. Don't forget the connector on the throttle body. You'll get a code if you don't. So now I just got to put this back on here. And that's it. So we're ready to try and get this thing started. One thing I do want to point out, or I wanted to show you guys, was why this tool is so awesome. This is the magnetic spark plug socket. The reason it's so great is because it's literally magnetic, right? The old ones are, well, the standard style has a rubber boot inside of it. And if you're in a hard to reach spot, and you can't get, like I said, pliers down in there to pull this off, sometimes wiggling it out with an extension on it doesn't work. So literally once it's tight, you just pull the spark plug socket off and it's strong enough to hold it when you go down in there. So, you know, this is the only one I have now, but I used to have a big set of these with extensions and they swivel and all that stuff. Really, really nice. So if you have a chance to get one of these to use, it's definitely worth it. I don't know, it's about $8 for this socket. So definitely get that. All right, well, I'm gonna see if I can get this thing started, and appreciate you guys if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel. I'll be doing some more auto repair. So, see if I can get this thing started, and we'll see you guys on the next video.